Welcome to the Draw and Look podcast, where I, Andrew Luke, draw you into another look at creativity and stories. Basically put, it's whatever I decide it is. Entertainment, pop culture, subculture, not too broad a range. That paradigm is about to shift in our 23rd episode with my edgy guest, Phoebe A. Xavier, aka Pax. Hello, Phoebe.
Hi, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Bright spots. We've got drugs,
I got a duty too. We're good.
cigarettes, coffee. Yeah. We're all about it. So Phoebe is the architect of 123 Go Publications, writing, penciling, and editing many of its wares alongside new and accomplished visual authors. 123 Go has produced 15 comics in the last number of years, with its first prose collection, Superliminal Latency, on its way. There's immersive scenarios, in the word of Joseph Surveillance, visceral world building, gut punch twists, all motifs of Phoebe's style. I feel I should say more to introduce such a powerhouse. So to cover up my obvious feelings, I'm going to turn to Phoebe for question one. Can you tell us about yourself and your life as an artist? You're from Vermont, New Jersey, Texas, a dozen other places. There's a lot I don't know about you, Phoebe. Rap, zines, I just don't know.
Yeah, I do. I've lived in a lot of places in America before. Um, in this past year, I've lived in like about a year ago to the day I would have been in Pinellas County, St. Petersburg. Then I spent my winter in Lincoln, Nebraska, with some really good friends out there. And then I relocated here to Brattleboro, which was kind of like my plan all winter. Was I just knew Vermont was not the type of place you relocate to in the dead of the winter because it's way too cold. So I waited for it to warm up, and I came here last May. And while I do work on creative stuff with mostly writing and editing and lettering of comic books, but I also have a day job working at a cafe, making artisan sandwiches and doing the customer service thing. So, but yeah, as far as in my life as a creator and like where I've lived overall in my life, yeah, I'm from, I was born in New Jersey, and which is not a part of New York City. That I guess people from other countries don't always know that, but it's not. It's across the river. Um, and um, and then I grew up around Philadelphia, a beautiful place called Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is where George Washington crossed the Delaware. I know that's kind of a famous part of our history. Ambushed the Hessian soldiers on Christmas Eve or whatever. So yeah, that's the part of the world that I kind of come from. And even from back when I was in high school, I was already writing stories, and I think I must have been 10 when I tried to draw my first comic book. I wasn't a very good artist, but I was, had the storytelling in me. And I spent a long time as a rap artist, from maybe age 20 to about age 40. I was pretty serious about that. And so came a time about maybe 12 years ago as I was deciding to phase out of being serious about my rap music. It was like, I'm 40 years old. I'm a transgender artist in a very misogynistic sort of genre. And so I was like, I'm going to still do hip hop shows, but I just stopped writing as much of it. And I directed my attention writing towards fiction. And that's what brought me to create 123 Go eventually, was they had started making enough comic books and not just producing my own books, but also stories that other writers and artists were contributing to. So I created the umbrella concept of 123 Go as a brand that represents all of the comic book creative work that I'm in.
Cool. And how long has 123 Go been on the go?
At least 5 years. I would say that the Serial Apogee, my flagship book, that was in development since at least maybe 2014, but that was at least 2 or 3 years later that I was like, well, let's create our own little label or whatever.
Speed round. I'm going to go through the lineup of books, and I want you to hit us with a brief description of each. I've got plenty of notes to back up. I'm sure you know this stuff inside out. So, Serial Apogee.
Describe it. It is a cyberpunk anthology book. It takes place predominantly in the 25th century, the 2400s, between the 2450s and the 2460s. Although some tales that like kind of start a few hundred years before and then end in that time era also occurs. That's what issue number 5 is like. But yeah, predominantly in the 2450s and 60s. And it is a shared universe, which is overseen by a corporate / law enforcement entity known as Soulcore. And Soulcore, the leaders of Soulcore are appointed by the 5 biggest corporations in the solar system. So it's very much, people have this phrase, late stage capitalism. It's like advanced solar system, like consuming capitalism, where we're mining the satellites and moons of the gas giants, you know, to send back to Mars or to send back to the moon. Earth is kind of a wasteland. Earth only has like 5 functioning cities left, and to breathe the air on Earth like is to become infected with this airborne form of Ebola that we call the Umbra. And so Earth is actually has a lower population than Mars or the moon in most of the stories. And yeah, and we don't have like Star Wars or Star Trek type warp drive or whatever technology in this. So the it's limited to the solar system, what we could fly to within a few years, or with their more advanced drives like engines, they're able to do it, you know, in a month or 2. But it's still not like we could go to Alpha Centauri or something. We don't have the tech to do that.
One of the things I really like about Sidereal Apogee is that it's got kind of recurring characters. I mean, each tale stands alone, but there's the more you read of it, there's a sense the reality that it's part of a bigger fabric that Soulcore recurs. Characters like Hardek and Kane recur.
Okay.
There's other.
Yeah.
So and there's a similar sort of tone to it. Santa Claus by Jeffrey Haas.
Is Jeffrey Haas's brainchild? Yes. And Joe Wong, yes. And Jeff is brilliant. Jeff has been writing for a long time, writing comic books for a long time, and that was a book that he had the idea for it, and he didn't have anyone else that was going to pick it up or publish it. And I told him I would definitely put it out through. It's available right now on Indie Planet, indieplanet.com/123go. You go get both issues if you want. Digital downloads, I think, are 99 cents. But yeah, Jeff was working with Joe Wong. I did a little bit of editing at the end. That was kind of a hands-off editing thing because I didn't get to really give corrections to Joe, and so I had to like redo a speech bubble here or there to get the corrections I wanted in. But yeah, Mumu SF, Mama SF, who's done some brilliant work in Sidereal Apogee. He's from the Philippines. He did the cover for Sidereal number 4, and he's going to do number 7 as well. But yeah, Mama is the cover artist for Santa Claus. So the interior art in Santa Claus is a little different than what you see on the cover. But yeah, Santa Claus is a great little story about.
It is great. It is great. So the blurb you have: when young Jeremy is let down by his mother, he is soon then picked up by Santa Claus. Next, he'll discover what horrors go on in Santa's workshop, and it's a wonderful reinvigorating of Christmas folklore and a red chili in the eye of capitalist myth. I think it does both quite well. I want to come on and talk about that a bit more later. Gunmetal Black Ops.
Gunmetal Black Ops is our espionage anthology book, where if anybody has stories that involve assassins or spycraft or anything else that is tied to that sort of world. And it was originally kind of made to be a place to feature Frederick B. Roseman's characters, Black Cauldron and Jade Lion. And they're 2 bodaciously attractive assassins that are a lesbian couple. And that they are the most regularly recurring characters in that book. But to fill each issue, we have other stories as well. And what do we have to? We have 3 of them published right now, and number 4 is not ready for print, but a lot of it is ready. I'm waiting for coloring on 2 pages, and then number 4 will be pretty ready to go. And that book is also the place that our other big, at least, I mean, we have 2 issues out, and the 3rd is fairly well produced. Most of the production is on at least the line, is Moloch Reigning Devil. Moloch Reigning Devil debuted in Gunmetal Black Ops #1. And so he was like an 8-page story in the beginning, or as the B story in the first issue of Gunmetal Black Ops. And yeah, and then Jeff later came to me with places, like an idea to keep continuing that story. And that's where we got our other book, Moloch Reigning Devil.
Moloch Reigning Devil is a story
Yes.
about a new devil reigning in hell, betrayed by God. He is burning to get revenge and begins consolidating the various demons to turn against their former master, the Big G. Trouble.
Trouble, the scintillating, ravishing razor girl Trouble, is my comedy action book. And we only have the one issue completed right now. I have like 12 pages of issue 2 done, but we stopped production on issue 2 so we could put her in one of our horror stories. And I have a Trouble versus Cthulhu story that I'm working on presently. But Trouble basically is the code name of this woman, Tamika Kennedy, and she is in the 2450s. She lives on the moon. She's retired from the Soul Corps Marines. She also has an experimental type of nanotech built into her arms, and she can like manifest into the giant claw that comes out of her arms, like both arms wielding these huge claws. And you'll see in the Trouble versus Cthulhu story, she can also do it into other forms. She kind of uses it to make a wingsuit at one point in the story we're working on now. And so yeah, it's kind of adaptive, but she is a sassy lady, another bodacious, very, very attractive lady. And but she looks like she's 20, but she's actually 40, because in the future, if you can afford that, you can do that. And she's retired, and she lives at a place on the moon called Straylight Beach, which is like Easter egg from William Gibson's Neuromancer. Straylight is the satellite place that the final chapters take place on, or whatever. And yeah, so she lives on a beach on the moon. So it's like a domed city where they make it like a beach resort kind of. And she just wants to sit on the beach and drink mojitos and go out with her girlfriend, who's a android prostitute escort, because I try to keep it PG-13. But yeah, and there's been just a crazy outbreak of crime, and every 15 minutes, her ex-boyfriend, who happens to be the sergeant of police in Straylight Beach, keeps calling her for assistance, and she reluctantly gets into skirmishes to protect the units.
Okay, book number 6 is 13th Moon, a big 52-page. I'll let you have a drink, and it's a seven tales of horror and wonder, a Halloween horror anthology hosted by Mary the Time Bender, who is a giant raccoon.
Yeah. Mirror, I think, can take any size or form that he wants. I think the one thing that he has to always have is like the weird star shapes around his eyes. I think other than that, like he's pretty much a shapeshifter. But yeah, he is innately a raccoon mystic figure or whatever. And yes, so the premise there is kind of like that he goes around time and space and collects weird tales and then shares them to us in this book. So he's our crypt keeper or whatever, like from Tales from the Crypt. But so the stories themselves, this is a book that every year I seek other people's contributions. That is an anthology of creators. And the first one was a successful Kickstarter 2 years ago. The second one was a failed Kickstarter last year, and I'm ready to release that in the next month or two through Kablam Indie Planet, but we're not going to do another Kickstarter for that. But that one, the volume 2 is 66 pages, and it's, I think, 8 stories. And we even are working on volume 3, which is that Trouble vs. Cthulhu story, will be the cover story for that one. And we have 5 or 6 other stories. It'll be a much shorter volume than the first one, but we do have a volume 2 and a volume 3 coming out of that as well.
So there's a sort of recurrence of motifs from Japan, manga, science fiction, Western. There's a lot of hybrid genre stuff, SF and F and horror. And through all this, you've built up quite a stable of artists. We mentioned a few of them that are doing more duty. Juan Manuel Almiron, Joe Wong, Frederick B. Roseman, George Louis Gabato. I'm curious about your recruitment process. How do you get a feel that they are the right ones?
I mean, as you're in them with me, like there's a number of comic book forums, which is a good place for creatives to meet up. Some of them have specific names like comic book writers seeking artist or comic book artists, whatever, like, seeking work. And so Facebook has been the major place where I find people. It comes down to if I love what they do, like if I see the art and I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, why aren't you published already? Or like, can I afford to pay you to be in one of my books? Also, Ben DeMaio, who drew a story for Gunmetal Black Ops #4 and a story for 13th Moon Volume 3, is a friend of mine that I worked with in Philadelphia last year. We were baristas together at the French Tea Cafe. So that was just someone who I knew like was into comic books and into drawing, but had never really drawn a comic book. It was like, Ben, let's work together. Like, let's work something out because you're really talented and let's publish a book. And yeah, so and there are other people that from just my day-to-day life that have wound up in some of the books. My friend Kingdom, she has done some coloring in one of the stories for Sidereal Apogee. That's someone who I used to travel with when I used to live out of a backpack. So sometimes it does come from like organically from people in my life. But yeah, also it comes down to like right now, like the going rates for an artist in America, and just cost of living too, is like people who aren't necessarily Jim Lee want to get paid like they're Jim Lee in America. And like that sometimes they have to find people from different countries who the dollar goes a lot further with them, but their art is still freaking amazing. So it's absolutely an aspect of how I operate.
I should probably declare at this point what they called members' interest for MPs, in that I have a story in Sidereal Apogee #7, drawn by the very talented George Louis Gabato, who's just got this wonderful sort of character expressions and a kind of a very gritty realist, but with a sense of the wacky to it. And his stuff is just kind of packed. It's exploding, and I'm really enjoying how those pages are coming in.
Mr. Gabato, who is working on that story that you wrote, he is known as Hjorsh. Anybody that's friends with George knows him as Hjorsh. And yeah, Hjorsh is brilliant, and he's had a number of successful Kickstarters. And I think they got book 2 of this one out. Yeah, Hjorsh has been involved in a bunch of projects. And that I think he's pretty popular and well known in our community of underground sort of comic creators right now. Yeah. Hjorsh is a hot commodity, and I'm very lucky to work with him when I do.
We are, yeah.
He's got a story with Leanne. I don't know how to say her last name at the moment, but he's got a story that goes into 13th Moon Volume 2. It's a Halloween, like it's a haunted pumpkin kind of thing.
We've also got, we were put in touch through Chris McCauley, who you brought on as a colorist, I think fairly early in his coloring forays, and what he brings to Malik, Rain Devil, is just this real electrification. It really just, that with the main artist,
JMA, Juan Manuel.
Yes, and they just raise, the two of them raise that to a whole other level.
When me and Jeff were first putting Malik Raining Devil #1 together, I didn't really plan to even color it. I was like, I can afford to pay JMA. I don't know if we're gonna find a colorist or not. Because the other colorist I have, Francine Apello, who does brilliant work. She colored Trouble #1. She colors all my Trouble pages. But she's like in college in the Philippines, and it's only like on certain breaks that she gets to work that she'll do a whole bunch at once for me. So it's like I didn't have someone that I could go to for the coloring necessarily on Malik. And then when Chris joined the team, he's like, oh yeah, how do you like this? And he just like, I think he might have done it without us asking him to. And he gave us like a page #1 of Malik #1. Like, holy shit, that's awesome. Like, to keep going, please. Like, yeah. And he's gonna be coloring, he's already started coloring Malik #3. But I have a Moloch one-shot that I wrote, actually called Moloch in Pride's Maw. It's him versus the Sin Pride. And I am getting someone else to color it, and it's going to be more of a duotone sort of thing. We're just going to like be between like purplish and like red colors, and like that'll be I want to say it'll be more like just flatting, because it'll be more detailed, but it's going to be in just two tones. And I don't think Chris will be the artist on that, but yeah, that's to put that out there as something coming in the future.
For people who aren't in the biz, are we both in the biz now? I know the biz.
Pro-ams, yeah, sure.
Besides sort of paying the colorist, you've got far less sort of reproductive costs when you're using something like Kerblam or Indie Planet, and you will provide an e-copy for them to sell, but they're also print on demand operations. So if the customer wants the luxury of reading a print, they take that cost on.
Yeah. Indie Planet is brilliant. Yeah, because it's print to sell, I can only order maybe 50 copies of the book and try to sell them to people in my life. But then, yeah, when I advertise online and then somebody comes across and they think it looks good or whatever, then it's every single time they need order a copy, the plan will just print a single copy. Like, that's pretty cool.
Why are you drawn to the anthology format with maybe about half your line? Were there obvious influences there, like 2000 AD or heavy metal?
Yeah, sort of. As a kid, I used to read Marvel Comics Presents, which was one of the Marvel anthologies, which was going when I was a collector in my early years. I think also I used to read. My mom gave me a bunch of her comics when I was really young, and she used to collect in the 50s and 60s. So like I had also horror anthologies like Tales from the Crypt or like The Witching Hour, and like so stuff like that was some of the first books to inspire me. Also, there's a comic book Facebook forum, comic book anthology creators, which I found to be one of the more respectably run and just a good community of creators in there. And I find it's a common streak amongst underground indie creators to do Kickstarters that are sort of group sourced, like, hey, I want to do this thing and it's this theme and who's got good ideas, then the one creator gets to be the editor-in-chief on that and be like, okay, these stories are in, these stories are out, and like, I don't know, I'm part of Florida Anthology at the moment. Andrew Burkett, I believe is his name, the guy who came up with the idea. He's in Florida. And so I have a story going in that, and it's another instance of like, I have this idea, let's do a book of both fake and real Florida man hashtag story. And mine could be fun. It's about a guy that smokes meth with an alligator and has sex with her. Yes, I think it's just like, it is almost part of the course for where we're at in the industry. Like, it's a good way to pool our resources and pool our audiences, and everybody wins when we win.
Yeah, there's very obvious functional, practical reasons for doing an anthology. If it falls through, you've got less of a hole to cover. You get a lot of work for a lot of different people, the opportunity to tell many stories. But I find there's also that sort of trade-off as well. It's a double-sided hook. If you don't have the length and the time necessarily to get behind one set of characters and problems and resolutions, but then if you don't like that, you move on to the next, and there is one.
Also, I think with some of the bigger projects, some of the bigger successes in the underground circuit of comic books these days, when you're pitching, like, they don't want to, if they haven't worked with you before, then they don't want to read your 8-page pitch. They might not even want to read your 4-page pitch, 6-page pitch. Can you tell a good story in 2 pages? Can you tell a story in 1 page? And getting in some of the bigger, Cthulhu is hard to spell. My story that I'm doing, Trouble vs. Cthulhu, was initially a pitch for that anthology. And I think I pitched it as an 8-page story there. And it's just like, I have to have the best 8 pages that he's ever read for him to give me that shot. And I understand that with creators that are running like $40,000 Kickstarters and stuff, like they kind of know that you're going to deliver on time and at 100% sort of your ability, that the page is perfect. So yeah, I think that anthologies are a safe space to debut newer talent, and Serial Apogee was always to me going to be that though. Like I wanted it, like you said, for some characters to cycle in and out and come back later. Some of them, even if they're dead, they can come back later because I just tell a story that happened 3 years before. And so Serial Apogee was almost invented for me to tell tales about people that died in other stories I had written as short fiction. I would not write short fiction. I wrote like 135 pages worth of a novel to world build that whole universe that Soulcore is in charge of. So and that's like sits half written on my laptop. But maybe one of these days I'll get back to it. But in the meantime, I'm doing a lot of other stuff that keeps me happy to be creative. But I established so much detail in that first 135 pages, and that it gave me a lot to work with to make a whole comic book series that we're now up to 7 issues, and you're going to be the writer in one of the stories in issue number 7.
Super duper. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I did my recent novel Occupied, now at Amazon, art direct from me, even better. I did a massive 160-page Bible for that, so there's an awful lot of stuff that didn't make it in, and not all the best stuff was able to make it in. Sometimes the editor writer slips up and lets in something at second best. So having that facility of the anthology where you can have cream from another crop and put that in, it gives you a way to tackle that and to show off all the work you've put in. If I could just draw you on crowdfunding a bit, can you talk about your experience with that? Have you crowdfunded a few 1, 2, 3 Go books?
So we launched Moloch Raining Devil #2 successfully on Kickstarter, and 13th Moon Volume 1 on Kickstarter successfully. I've also was a contributor to the first 2 modern mythology anthologies by Caleb Conquest, and that's something where that's his audience that he's drawing upon. I don't feel like I was a major driving factor in the success of those books. I think that maybe I was part of the satisfying product that the people got to read. But for the personal ones, the 1, 2, 3 Go ones, it was a lot of work getting 13th Moon Volume 1 funded. I think it was in the last day or two. A friend of mine who I know from Twitter, I happened to message them in the last 2 days and was like, we only need $240. And she was like, boom, and just like funded it right there. I was like, wow, that's amazing. I love having, friends that can just drop $240, not because she even wants the book, which is just like wanted Phoebe to succeed. I only did like maybe 3 or 4 podcasts on that one. And what I was doing instead, I think the real reason that we got funded was because I was hardcore direct messaging people on Facebook, friends of mine, and soliciting sales through that. And other people who have done a lot more Kickstarter have told me that our numbers of how many people came from my Facebook, like the amount of money that we got from Facebook and not random hits on Kickstarter was not good. And it's probably why we failed the second time around when I didn't have as much time to be hitting people up. I was working 2 jobs in St. Pete last year at the time that we were running a Kickstarter. But I think that Kickstarter is viable. I think that A, get your mailing list together. B, network with other people, creators that are gonna rep each other's stuff. People kind of do that promotional, cross-promotional, I'll promote your project, you promote my project, trade all kind of thing. But also, Jeffrey Haas, who writer of Moloch Raining Devil and Santa Claus and numerous other books, he books podcasts for people, since he does his own and knows so many people in the podcast world, diaspora, whatever, you can pay Jeff to book you about a whole bunch of podcasts. So that's what I've done over December and January to promote Superliminal Latency. He's booking a whole bunch. We're about to book a whole bunch of podcasts that I can appear on and hopefully generate some sales that way. But it's not going to be for a Kickstarter. But I do understand that the people that he's done the service for, he's like 4 or 5 Kickstarters in a row that they've fully funded. And it was because they're grinding on their podcast appearances during their Kickstarter. He's on Twitter and IG, and now he's even on TikTok.
Right. If you'd like Jeffrey to help give your thing a bit of a push, get in touch with him or reach out to Phoebe or myself, and we put you in touch with him. So let's talk about writing. Editor Joseph Surveillance makes reference to your uncompromising vision and fearless aesthetic. These aren't just kind words. I find your creative writing provocative, even aggressive at times, with room for, of course, really jazzy tangents and really fascinating world building. Some of that sort of provocation, the tangents, it reminds me in many ways of the Beat Generation writers, Kerouac, Ginsberg, Burroughs, later punk authors like Patti Smith. You've mentioned one of your stories, Hunter S. Thompson. Are those artists who informed your growing up and your passage to writing?
Kerouac, definitely, yeah. Burroughs a little bit. William Gibson is actually a big influence on my whole cyberpunk thing. I've read everything that Gibson's written, but except for Distrust, that particular flavor. But that's like his articles, a collection of articles he wrote for magazines or something. Thank you. That's the list that you just like listed. That I'm honored to be put next to that, or even in the shadow of those writers. My biggest influence as a little kid was definitely Isaac Asimov. My grandfather put Asimov in my hands when I was like 6. He knew that I was like reading at that kind of level, that I could do it, read it. And so, yeah, I was tearing through some pretty advanced sci-fi shit as a child. And comic books as well. I definitely Chris Claremont and John Byrne have to be 2 of the biggest influences on me as an early writer. Yeah, like anybody that's watched She-Hulk in the last couple of months, they actually did a decent version of like the John Byrne She-Hulk. It was pretty good.
I love that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And so, but yeah, I definitely lived that beat sort of on the road lifestyle for a good portion of my life too. So I got to see it firsthand, kind of the things that will inspire a person to get into certain modes of writing, I guess. Hunter S. I didn't really read much of until like the last 5 years is the first time I read Fear and Loathing, I think. And I've read some. Well, I used to read Hunter S.'s essays in Sports Illustrated, which is one of the things that I referenced in the Gonzo Gunfuck story.
His Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail in '77 is quite a read. Recommend it.
I read the one in Vegas, which I had already seen the movie for, but like that the book definitely had a little more to it that the movie lacked. Oh, you know who else I've been reading in the last couple of years that I should have gotten into so much earlier? Robert Anton Wilson. Robert Anton Wilson.
Yes.
Been a huge impact on me in the last 4 or 5 years.
He is fantastic, and I love everything I've read of his, and I haven't read enough. I kind of want to binge Robert Anton Wilson. He is an incredibly funny speaker, incredibly thoughtful. Everything from philosophy, quantum physics, politics. A great anecdotalist. If you've not heard of the man, go and search him out on YouTube.
He also he's another one that would be very provocative, or like pushing the edge of like, how shocking can I make this statement? Like, and can I do it 4 or 5 times in a chapter to really drill it home? Yeah, he's brilliant.
Grant Morrison?
Not really. I didn't really read a lot of his stuff, but I see it all on the TV now. So much of his stuff gets adapted to television. So yeah. I also stopped collecting comic books probably in like 1997-ish, which is like I dropped out of college and started like living in a lifestyle that demanded I pay rent and car insurance and car payments and didn't have like an extra $50 a month to blow on comic books. So yeah, I collected comics from the mid 80s to the late 90s, and then like anything that's been written in the last 20 years, there's a good chance I haven't read it.
I feel much the same way that I gave up comics about that sort of time, but I've got a cupboard of about 400 unread comics. It says otherwise. So I don't know. That's about. So big tits, big explosions, much pornographic sex focus, violence and violent language, main humor, up close and personal horror, confrontational reality in a world of aggressive politics and popular culture. Why don't you settle down and be nice? What's with all the culture and politics?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I understand what the question is.
Do you find you are writing through the sort of the culture and the politics that we're living in with your stuff? Because it's certainly, maybe it's not as dark as it's been before, but we're more aware of the information that we're living in the era of Trump and Boris and all these Putin and literal fucking psychopaths running the planet.
I mean, my take on where we're at in the world right now in global history is if there is a future to look back at this present, they will consider the beginning of World War III to be the invasion of Crimea in 2014. That World War III, the Trump administration was part of World War III, part of Russia trying to take over our government. The fact that so much soft war power is used, information and rigging of elections in 2016, things like this are acts of war, and we need to recognize that. And if we're going to get to the 22nd century with democracy intact, with our species not extinct. But I don't think I let too much of that drip into my writing. I think here and there I do. I'll let a shot rip here and there, but for me, it's more about storytelling and even characters that I want to, tell the stories of. So I don't try to drip too much of politics in it. Pop culture more than politics. Like yeah. I love leaving Easter eggs in my stories where it's like, I did so much research, I got to leave at least this one little phrase in there that like real nerds will know what I was talking about. Like, but yeah, I mean, even as a trans woman, I don't write a lot of stories that involve trans or queer people necessarily. I'm open to it. I'm not like, oh, I can't write about that. But it's just like, that's not what I center. Like, sci-fi is not dominated by those themes necessarily. So when it makes sense for the story or the character, I'm happy to drop shit like that in. But like, I don't force it in there just to be like, hey, I'm a trans person writing about trans shit. Like, I don't know. I think that's kind of hokey.
I guess what I was trying to get at the question, you've kind of answered it when you were talking about the sort of soft war. I mean, here in Northern Ireland, I just see incredibly high levels of lack of political engagement that kind of quite worry me. And it can be a sort of coping mechanism just to get on with your lives and don't talk about politics. Yeah, there is this sort of hard lean to the right that has been happening for quite a while, and we do sort of, myself included, need to recognize we are in a kind of a soft war. I think that's what you said, and that's a really good way of. But and your characters are very in your face, or some of them are. It's like very much a fuck you, dickhead, and they call the reader in that way of a very confrontational way. Yeah.
I think yeah, I definitely have some aggressive characters, some more than others. And yeah, I think, but insofar as the politics, it's not even like that people have different beliefs on ethics. It's people have different beliefs on what is real. And like, that is a really unhealthy place to be. Like, that you have people who like honestly believe that like Joe Biden didn't get 81 million votes. He did. Sorry, go fuck yourself. Everyone doesn't believe that. Like, you know? And or people that honestly believe, despite mountains of evidence, that Russia puppeted Trump through the whole election cycle, through his whole 4 years. Like, and or when they finally accept that that's real, then they're like, oh, I'm okay with that. Like, no, like that's nothing okay is going on there. Don't be okay with like an autocrat from a fucking fascist country puppeting our democracy. Like, how are you okay with that? Like, you clearly don't care about democracy. I don't know.
And this one's for Northern Ireland. The Northern Ireland Protocol is a good thing. Brexit is a bad thing. I have some stick figures and some numbers if you'd like to see those.
Yeah, Brexit is another thing that they're very clear, like tracing from that Putin paid for that. Like that the politicians in England were bought by Putin to make Brexit happen because he was trying to damage the EU, and he did. At least a minor setback economic.
So a lot of the content in the 1, 2, 3 Go books is written by you, but not all of it. And the notable big exception is you mentioned him around Jeffrey Haas. What drew you to Jeffrey's work to invest in it? So
I think it was through the comic book anthology creators Facebook forum that I just said, like, hey, anybody with Gunmetal Black Ops espionage story ideas? And so he had the idea of a guy that was sent to assassinate Lucifer. And then I was like, yeah, but could you give him a gun? Like, it's not going to work in the story unless you give him a gun. So he goes to hell with the shotgun and the sword, flaming sword. I guess I like the story. He had a really good story, and I haven't read all of his Sanctus books or anything necessarily everything that he's written. But I took a look at his work, and he clearly knew what he was doing, and has been doing it for longer than me. And yeah. I think that as far as a flagship character goes, Moloch is a great character to have as one of the main 1, 2, 3 Go, like what represents 1, 2, 3 Go. And yeah. And Jeff has also been easy to work with. Like when I do give him any sort of pushback, like, hey, I don't really like this part, we do something, he comes back with other ideas, and which is what I need from a creative writer or artist. Like, yeah, that is the editor-in-chief's actual job, is to be the final say if it does or does not go in. And people that can see that I'm not coming from that much of an ego-driven perspective when I try to make corrections or changes, see that it's just my vision of like, I see your vision, but like bring it to the 1, 2, 3 Go vision, and we're gonna put this out as a book.
Yeah, and I see when you're writing your own stuff, you often have editors that you bring in to edit you.
Yeah,
it's an important role.
I hired Joseph because I realized I couldn't. Joseph Cervellin, who edited my book, Superliminal Latency, that I started to try to edit it, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not going to make it that much better. I've read these stories too many times to see the flaws. So like, I need fresh eyes on this. And I think he has like a degree in literature and edits for other book companies. Like, and he writes pilots. He like when I don't know what studio or what creative house that he's created contracted to out in LA or whatever, out in California. But when there is a group of some studio that when they come up with ideas, they're like, we have like this elevator pitch, this 30 this 1 paragraph long explanation of the TV show that we want to make, and we have this actress attached to it if we can make a pilot. I know he's written a number of pilots like that. I don't think any of them have been picked up yet. But like he's a full-time writer and a very good guy to have editing your shit, for sure.
Good stuff. We'll talk about that book in a minute. I just want to say before we do, the Santa Claus book by Jeffrey, and Joe Wong just does this amazing job as an artist, makes it so beautiful and vibrant, and the script is so funny. And if you're looking for a great 1, 2, 3 Go book to come in under, I would recommend that lovely 2-issue series. I'm only through half of it. I'm probably going to read the second one tonight, I think. Superliminal. Sorry.
No, that one is a self-contained 2-issue story.
And if you go over to indieplanet.com/123go, you may find a few items on sale offer, and I'd strongly recommend checking those out.
Those are free downloads then for the yeah.
And
Anything
free. Wow.
Yep.
Do it. Do it. Do it. 1, 2, 3, go. Superliminal Latency. So this is 1, 2, 3 Go's first prose publication with 17 tales written by Phoebe. The voice is unmistakably yours. The tone of what I've read is very much like that of your comics. Many of the characters are there. The stories benefit from having a bit more room to spread out, which I think works really well for it. Said in your introduction that it was over 20 years in the building of this collection. What can you add to describe to that? That's not a proper sentence. What can you add in that description?
Well, it starts out with the forward or the introduction or whatever. I make it an allocution, which is it's supposed to be a warning to the reader and to let them know that a number of these stories cannot be unread. That I wrote, that I started to design this idea of a genre called horror porn, which they were horror stories, but they would be graphically pornographic and use drugs, hard drugs, alcohol, whatever, in a very abusive, sort of unhealthy way. And so those are like the core elements of my horror porn genre. And so, so that like at least a third of the book is that genre. And there are parts of it that are kind of like way more tame horror stories that are like just kind of spooky, scary that you could probably, PG-13 sort of level of horror. But yeah, then the cyberpunk book stories all take place in the sidereal apogee universe. And so, yeah, so like Harlequin and Sendo, they both appear in both the comic books and the story you're writing in your comic book, for example, and in the Superliminal Latency. The cover shows us Grace Atrophy. Grace Atrophy is a mercenary assassin hacker who appeared already in 2 issues of Sidereal Apogee. Yeah. So it's a lot of that, rogues of the galaxy, scoundrels versus so core kind of stuff. My favorite story, my favorite thing from that book is a story called The Slipstream Fiasco. And it is a comedy. It's definitely a comedy, and it's definitely got some graphic sex and some graphic drug use, but it's done so like whimsically and sort of like there's like this really innocent tone the whole time that it's a dead space trucker that is telling you from the beginning. He lets you know he's dead from like the first line or two. He's telling the whole story, and that was my favorite one. And I was actually doing a lot of weird hallucinogens at the time that I wrote it. And that one features Herbert the Walrus, who's a talking walrus in like a, kind of dressed like Sherlock Holmes, basically. And he sits at the bar all day and gets drunk. And he's the main character's best friend. Herbert the Walrus is inspired by a character that was, I told you that I wrote stories in high school. So it was me and my friend Ryan Conley, and I think to a lesser degree Dave Marcy, that we wrote these stories about Fran and Dom. And Fran was Francis Theodore Cat, and he looked just like Felix the Cat, and he was Felix the Cat's cousin, but somehow he slipped into the real world universe, kind of like Roger Rabbit or whatever. And then Don was Don Juan, who was a Puerto Rican gigolo who mysteriously spoke with a Jamaican accent. And they were part of the Intergalactic Police Force, and they answered to an overweight porpoise. So that overweight porpoise that was their boss is kind of the inspiration for Herbert the Walrus being like just a regular guy, like, you would hang out with, like, you could work with, and he's just a walrus. We never explained why he's a walrus, or like how walruses can talk, or how they can, drink alcohol, afford to do so. He's married. He's an astrophysicist and a lawyer or something. But yeah, so that's my favorite from the book. The book is weird. It's 17 short stories, like I said. As far as what the way I wrote the stories, and my rule in general for writing stories is having the idea for the ending and the title usually before I start it. And as long as I feel good about the title and the ending, then I can fill in the parts in between. And that's mostly how they were written, and most of them have at least a minor twist.
I think we should be straight. And if anybody's turned off by the talk of horror porn, it is a collection of a number of different styles. So I'm reading a really great kind of sci-fi kind of heist sort of type thing with mercenaries investigating a docked spaceship that kind of just has been eating up anybody who goes inside it for the last couple of 100 years.
The Trojan salvage.
Pardon?
The Trojan salvage?
Yeah, the Trojan salvage. And it's a real sort of gripping, tense thing, as well as having a lot of humor in it. And from the other stories I've read, there's a bit of different types of, you said horror porn, hard sci-fi.
Some of it's like much tamer horror. Like Own Worst Voodoo Doll is what is way more PG-13. Trainwreck is almost PG. Dinner Time is definitely like almost PG. And yeah, so the way that what I explained in the allocution is that if you're looking at the table of contents, if you see a story that has no capitalized letters in it, then that is a horror porn story. So I let the reader know ahead of time how to avoid that gory or oversex stuff if they want to do that. I definitely don't expect every reader to be able to stomach some of those stories.
Yeah, I really like that sort of feature of you putting together your love for technology and for codes. So stories you classify as horror porn, like capitalized letters in the title. A single capital letter in the title contains some graphic elements. So that's helpful and important and smart, and you're an ethical hacker.
Yeah, I try to be.
Could we talk about what horror porn is and why?
I mean, like I said, it's pretty, it's very, very graphic. All the stories that I define as horror porn have some graphic elements that I wouldn't necessarily want to read if I was like opening a book and not knowing what I was going to read, and then I got to some of the parts I was like, oh, that's too gross for me, I'm going to stop. I am not somebody that can stomach a lot of horror. I don't watch like slasher stuff. As a kid, I was too scared to watch Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th and stuff like that. I would even run out of the room when the Wicked Witch of the West would like chase Dorothy and shit. Like I was definitely like a squeamish kid when it came to horror. And later in life, I grew into like enjoying some of it. But even then, it's more like fantasy-oriented horror appeals to me way more than like people killing each other, grim shit. Like, and which is in some of my stories, admittedly. But as I also explained in the allocation, it's like I get the idea. It's a good story idea. I don't have like 50,000 ideas, so I should write the ones that I have an idea for. And so yeah, so some of them were not even comfortable to write, and then reading them again as I was editing them, I was like, oh man, that was gross. What was I thinking? But yeah, Joseph made me rewrite a couple passages in some of them that I think made them better, because I think probably on the first pass that he got to read and edit, it like was obvious that like Phoebe kind of took a step back and just like didn't sort of phoned it in through certain passages because they were like hard to write and read.
Graphic violence and graphic substance abuse. And so if you're not so much of a fan of some of this horror stuff, why write it? Why write horror, actually, generally?
I just, because, like I said, it's because I come up with an idea that I'm like, oh, I don't think anybody's done that. I'm like, I should write that story. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to give it to somebody else to write. Yeah.
I'm not a horror fan myself. Maybe I just haven't tried hard enough. I just wonder about the lure of making your audience shit their pants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's like if it was bothering me, it better bother other people. Like, so yeah. And also like some of the erotic parts that it's like, oh wow, is this sexual or is this just like weird and gross? Like it's very graphically depicted, but like I'm not aroused by it. I'm just kind of like, like cringy. Yeah, so that's just cringy. Which there's an audience for cringe these days. So
hard sci-fi would seem to be one of the other big elements of the book. You already mentioned I had you figured for an Isaac Asimov fan. Philip K. Dick, maybe. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you read the bio at the end, but in the bio at the end of the book, when I'm thanking Joseph for his work as the editor, I mentioned that Joseph never failed to remind me that I'm not James Joyce, because that's something that came up a number of times. She's like, "Phoebe, you can't do this. You're not James Joyce."
I hate that. Why do they say that?
that I'm not James Joyce yet, and that probably not even the mashup of PKD and William Gibson that I aspire to be. That yeah, I think that the two artists
Goodness Claire. I'm James Joyce.
So the two authors that I whose coattails I'm chasing are PKD and William Gibson. I don't know if you've read much Gibson, but he is the king. He's definitely the king of cyberpunk, the creator of cyberpunk, and the king of sci-fi.
Cool. So yeah, I really enjoyed a few of the stories I read. I'm going back into it. When is Super Latency due for release? Where can we get that?
I have I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I have a version that I'm going to, when I finish the back cover, we're working on the back cover blurb right now. When I nail that down, I'm going to print a author's copy through Kablam. I'm going to have them send me a single copy to make sure, because this is the first time I've ever published a prose book. Make sure that my margins are good as you turn through, that I've left enough space, kind of. And Joseph is also doing a final pass like next week at some point. That I guess we have different curly quotation marks. In some stories they're straight up and down, and some they're curly. So it's like going to be a 5-hour process to go through like 16,000 quotation marks or something that Joseph is going to do on the final pass, and make sure, since I just finished my final edit for the author's version order, so I would expect by no later than December 1st, I should have copies that or at least my order in for the it's about a 3-week turnaround with anything. By the first week of December, I should have some, and hopefully it'll go live then, both on Indie Planet, and I'm going to look into the whole. It doesn't seem hard to get it available on Amazon, so probably around the same time should be on Amazon and the Indie Planet.
Okay, fantastic. Have you more crowdfunders coming? What's the next comic?
So I'm kind of committed to crowdsource Malik #3 with Jeffrey whenever we get that done. I think it's probably not till like next June almost that might be done though. The next one that might be done before then is Vikings Saga of the North. I've been working with Jose Diaz, and he's in Guatemala. And he has, we've gotten a 22-page historical accounting of the Viking Age, historically accurate, and that built out of the initial 40 pages that he sent me, like that this is like, I'm doing this Viking comic book, and work with him and his friend Douglas to kind of whittle down from the raw art to what the actual narrative story we could tell, that what historical recounting we can do. And that one is getting closer and closer to done. That one we have the 22 pages of line art worked out pretty much. I'm waiting for the colors from him, and then I'll do the lettering. The other thing we're doing with that one is he has, his friend Douglas has helped him find an audience of like 2,000 Instagram followers, which I know, I'm like 4 Instagram followers, 40, I don't know. I'm definitely not a celebrity or anything on Instagram, and an influencer. But yeah, so he has like 2,000 followers, mostly out of Germany. So we're going to possibly launch this book in German and in English initially, with possibly a stretch goal of doing a Spanish version as well, because Jose is Spanish, or speaks Spanish in Guatemala. And but yeah, I'm pretty excited about the book. His art is amazing. I work with Douglas and Jose to refine what the raw vision that they had into, like, hey, let's go from point A to point B to point Z and tell the story of the Viking Age. And he does drop a lot of like random knowledge and just establishing culture about what did they eat, what did they wear, like, what sort of experiences define their day-to-day life. So it's not all just Vikings cutting each other up or raiding and pillaging or anything like that. It seeks to be educational. And
Yeah, it's just a bit of a departure for 123 going doing a
oh
historical.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. This is our first historical book. Yeah, no, and but that's how he brought it to me. Like he was like, I just want to tell the Vikings in the most like historically accurate way. This is my friend Douglas, who's like at graduate level of studying Vikings. I know that he does like if not archaeological work, at least like in the field, learning from the archaeological spaces that we the Instagram, the Vikings Saga of the North Instagram shows Douglas doing like rowing a longboat that they made in the exact specifications of how they were made 1,100 years ago. So yeah, now I'm excited about the historical accuracy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And he's so the next book that Jose has lined up, even a follow up from that one after we get the Kickstarter, hopefully funded on that one. He's doing a mythology version where he's like, drawing frost giants and dwarfs and other things that come from the mythology of the Norse or of the Vikings in general. And so that'll be another 20-page sort of ish book that'll be telling or relating factoids at least about them with really good art about them. And then following that up, I've been talking to him about an idea. Eventually we'll work on this, might be a year or two out, but I have a story that is sort of a mishmash of like having the historical perspective and the mythological perspective. And it's going to be a Viking ship that sails out of Iceland in about like 1300 or something. And they're going to go the northern route, like through the Arctic oceans. And so sail across northern Russia and wind up kind of over in Japan. And we're going to have like contemporary Viking forces finding, medieval Japanese forces. And two of the characters that I'm throwing in there in the mythological like sort of thing is we're going to have Yule Cat. Do you know who Yule Cat is from Iceland? He's this giant cat that eats you if you don't have new Christmas clothes or whatever. This is an Icelandic myth. So we're gonna so he's gonna be on the boat with my Vikings, and we're also going to, since they have beliefs in like dwarves and elves, I'm gonna have like a dark elf, like a I guess what in D&D terms would be a drow or a drow or whatever. We're gonna have one of them be the best friend of the Yule Cat, and then otherwise like just standard Icelandic Vikings. But that is a story that I'm really amped to tell with Jose in a year. So yes, help us fund the first book when we launch it, so we can get to those other ones later.
So I'll try and include a link to Kickstarter of one of the creators in the next. We can put that in the show description. Any other links I should be putting in there?
Oh, just one. Okay, so yeah, so but the actual Instagram then for people to follow for the Vikings book is Vikings Saga of the North, but with an underscore between each word. At Vikings Saga of the North with an underscore between each word. I'll text you that later.
I'll get that in, and of course, you're at indieplanet.com/123go. Most of the books are up there.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks very much, Phoebe, for joining us. It's great conversation. Pleasure. And yeah, 1, 2, 3, go.
1, 2, 3, go. Thanks for having me.
Thanks to all my patrons on Patreon who keep the electricity running here month to month. My top suppliers, Ian Lawler, Alan Ryle, Benjamin Stone, Art Knipe, Michael Daly, Arslan Hyder Ali, Claire Byrne and John Robbins. There's many a bonus for that. Stories, poetries, comics, collections, commentaries, early releases of the Drunlook podcast, and I've never read Discworld. For less than blah per month, you know it's real. Patreon.com/Andy Luke. You can put coffee on my table at ko-fi.com/Andy Luke. Or we can spend many weeks together with me in your loving arms, expressed by the novel Occupied. Follow the zany antics of our Belfast protesters as they camp and provide their way under the rain clouds, demonstrating as mud slides and snow falls around them, snatching laughs and love between insomnia and paranoia. Occupied by Andy Luke is for sale on Amazon. Goddamn capitalism. Be sure to check my archives. I'm so proud of the audio essays in the bank. Next week, I'll be on my other podcast, I've Never Read Discworld, as we consider Book 3, Equal Rights. And on the Druin Look, I welcome Richard and Stephen from Back Pocket Comics, a little local company with a prolific output. See you there.